Part 4, High Holiday Prep. I don't know if I ever told you this story. At Vanderbilt, I took a class in the book of Genesis, and the professor who taught it once told us the story about the Akedah. The Akedah is the binding of Isaac. And we talk about volunteers. Eli, Perez, how many years will it be this Rosh Hashanah? 29 or 30? 30 years. Kanea Hora Pupui, 30 years. 30 years he's been chanting the Akedah. So the question is why? So at Vanderbilt, there was a symposium about the binding of Isaac. And one of the professors asked, what would you do if God told you to sacrifice your son? Would you do it? One person rose their hand. Professor of psychiatry said, before you do that, why don't you call me first? But here's the question. Why on Rosh Hashanah, the birthday of the world, why do we read a story that is near maddening terrain about a father who would blindly sacrifice his son to the God of Israel? When Eli gets to the part, he pauses. He goes, Hineni, correct? He pauses. He wants to get, it's emotional. The story, again, is maddening. But the question is as to why do we read the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, on Rosh Hashanah? Why this story? Why would it not be, which seems obvious, Genesis chapter 1, Bereshit bara Elohim v'et hashamayim v'et ha'aretz? That seems illogical and rational, but why would our rabbis want us to read such a terrifying story? The characters, we have Jacob. Ishmael was there. Abraham, Isaac. Why Abraham would do this to Isaac? Is it a conversation about blind loyalty to God? The rabbis are going to reject that. So in a way, Abraham fails the test. Or does he? Is it a conversation about why things happen to good people or bad people? That's a question of theodicy. Is that why we read it on Rosh Hashanah? Again, why do we read such a difficult story? Some rabbis don't even read it. They opt for an alternative reading because the story is too difficult to bear. But again, the question remains, why? What does Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur force us to do? Reflect, introspect, we examine what we did right, where our humanities were. That's my word for things that we did wrong. It's all about the human condition. And moreover, we talk about fear, love, jealousy. We talk about all these transgressions, and we look at the Torah itself. It is a representation of the human condition. We have difficult family dynamics, conspiracies. And that's why the rabbis believed that the Akedah was the archetype. It was the story that we're supposed to read. There's a notion called Misarat Nefesh. This is giving up or surrendering one's soul or oneself. Now, the mystical understanding that what are we giving up? What are we surrendering? Well, Abraham was going to surrender his son. But again, he doesn't pass the test. So what are we supposed to do on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? How do we engage in Mesarat HaNefesh? Surrendering the soul. Personal self-sacrifice. Think deeper. The birthday of the world requires us to try for us to improve our imperfections. And this biblical story is emblematic of improving one's imperfections. It is so maddening that the rabbis want us to see what something looks like on the extreme so that we can find center. So what does surrendering oneself or self-sacrifice look like us today? Perhaps sacrificing how we respond when we get upset. Maybe the gift to find perspective, to see the silver lining in things. On top of that, when we're here at Shul during the high holidays, we're supposed to challenge God. So here is a perfect story in which we are given the permission to say, this story doesn't seem right. So the Akedah on Rosh Hashanah is about us sacrificing the things that hinder us from perfecting ourselves. That's the reason. Now, when we study this in rabbinical school, it's a bit of a stretch to come to this conclusion of Mesirat HaNefesh, surrendering one's soul. But we're supposed to find any understanding of this maddening text. And believe me, when Eli gets to Hineni part and he stops, it's supposed to terrify us. So for us, the binding of Isaac is the binding of our imperfections. It's our transgressions. And just as God stopped Abraham from sacrificing his son with the angel, it's this idea that Mesirat HaNefesh that will stop, that will figure out a way that will stop ourselves from potentially causing harm to other people. That's why we read the Akedah, to improve ourselves.